Really? Did they come to visit? On Christmas
All right, so we'll see just how tangled up I can get in this microphone tonight. So we do have a quorum, and it appears to be 6:30, so I would like to call to order the 7th regular meeting of the Board of Directors of SAD 52, and if Richard could lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So our first order of business will be to act on the minutes of November 18th. Any errors or omissions noted on those? Seeing none, we accept those under general consent. That brings us to communications. Teresa.
Yes, I have one resignation to report. Randall Swift, District Technology Director, effective February 11th, 2022.
Thank you. Moving on to item 4, adjustment to the agenda. And that adjustment is to move, unless there are objections, move agenda items 9.11 through 9.13 before agenda items 9.7 through 9.10. I believe the rationale on that is that 9.7 through 9.10 are executive sessions, and any action as warranted from those, and the other ones are not. Any objections?
No.
If not, we will proceed in that manner. That brings us to committee reports. Finance, Yuri.
We met this evening. We signed AP and payroll warrants. We reviewed the October expenditures for the district. Everything is right on track as we would expect. There was a couple points that Dean mentioned that he was going to look into a little bit more in November. Those points were just to do a quick check to see how we're comparing versus previous years on bus and fleet repair costs, as well as maintenance costs, just to kind of get a stance of where we are this year. you'll notice that we're a little under expensed on the instruction and regular instruction and special ed instruction lines, which are mainly due to a handful of unfilled positions. And then the last thing we discussed was the board had approved a new well for Turner Primary School a month or so ago, and it has been approved by the state location, and so it is moving forward quickly.
Thank you. PTV, Jessica. That meeting was pushed off because our last meeting was virtual, and I think, where's Dean? Dean's back there. Dean had sent over some updates. There were items that the committee had discussed previously, exciting things like the wastewater treatment plant. That process is continuing. Dean, you did a great job of emailing committee members that update, if you wouldn't mind sharing some of those things, since it'll be a brand new year before that committee meets and reports out again.
If I do forget anything, please just let me know. Yeah, so we talked about the new well at Turner Primary School, and again, significance there being approval by DOE, was the preliminary approval, working with Goodwin Well to see what we can do in terms of scheduling for that. Other pieces there, I mentioned the wastewater treatment plant. The engineering is ongoing there, and they're looking at an alternate site for what they call the disposal field. And so that has to be brought back to DEP and DHHS for approval. So we're in that process, and we'll see exactly what's entailed. That was probably the most significant of those. I also know that we applied for 3 new buses through the state's bus replacement program, and those basically the state would pay approximately 80% of the principal cost of the bus. So it's a good deal if we're approved.
Thank you. And that committee will meet, as I indicated, once we're in a brand new year again, and we'll have more updates on all those items. Curriculum policy, Joanne.
We did meet. We had a fantastic presentation by the gifted, talented staff. Lots of good information, and I believe they're going to come to a board meeting sometime to present to everybody, so we all hear the same information. We discussed 3 different job descriptions, and 2 of those are on the agenda tonight. We discussed 6 different policies, and some of them are on tonight. And that's about it.
Thank you. That brings us to our student representative report. Tristan. And Tristan, if you'd like a microphone, we do have a couple others floating around here.
I think I'll manage. All right. So the second semester will be wrapping up rather shortly. With that, the second quarter of the first semester wrapping up soon by January. And the holiday vacation is also coming up. Students are quite excited. And that concludes what I have to report.
Excellent. Thank you. You did great without a microphone. That's always a good skill. That brings us to administrator report, and our agenda indicates none, but I'm thinking we'll punt a little bit here, and we do have a person who's been in the district for as long as I can remember, doing fantastic work, who is with us for her last meeting with us tonight. So, Razel, I have hard to encapsulate how much fun it's been seeing adult ed thrive under your guidance, and certainly it's a lot different. It's a lot different place than I think of it 10 or 15 years ago, and that's been tremendous amount of work that's gone into that. I think that Teresa also has a few words that Kim wanted to share, even though she's not here this evening.
Yes, so Kim Brandt had wanted me to share the following. Razel has been part of the MSAD 52 team for many years, 18 years to be exact. We have appreciated her and her excellent leadership in adult and community education. The adult ed graduation ceremonies exemplify the hard work and commitment Razel has shown to the students, staff, and the adult ed program over the years. Razel has been a strong and effective advocate for the adult ed program and a valued member of the administrative team. We wish her the very best in her new role in Lewiston. Razel, thank you for leading the MSAD 52 adult ed program to be the stellar and recognized program it is today. We will miss you. And I would like to add that I've appreciated Razel's dedication to the students, her work on the Dropout Prevention Committee, and her vision to help grow the community side of adult education. I wish you all the best in your new position, and Kim's right, you will be missed.
You will definitely be missed, for sure, and we wish you much luck and excitement in your new challenges as well. And Teresa's now pointing because clearly I need to have lots of direction in my work here. We do have a token of our appreciation for your, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, stay. I take up close to get pictures.
Okay, so it's a sheet. Oh, yes, I do. Yes, I do. Yes, we do. We have other.
Thank you both very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
So much for everything.
Be good.
All right. Moving right along to the superintendent's report, and Teresa's going to give that for us this evening.
Yes, I am. So I would like to start, Kim usually provides an update on the COVID information, and while I won't present as much information as she typically does, I do have some information on our students and staff. At Turner Primary School, we have 12 students in quarantine and no staff in quarantine. At the number of positive cases, 5 students and 1 staff. At Turner Elementary School, we have 4 students in quarantine and 1 student positive case. At Leeds, we have 12 students in quarantine and 2 staff, and 4 students have tested positive for COVID. At Green Central School, 26 students and 2 staff are in quarantine, and 6 students are positive cases. At Tripp Middle School, there are 8 students in quarantine, no staff, 4 students with positive cases, and 1 staff with a positive case of COVID. At Levitt, there are 15 students in quarantine, 9 students that are positive, and 1 staff. So the grand total, if I did my math correctly, is 51 students in quarantine and 2 staff members in quarantine. 23 students have tested positive and 3 staff. I'd like to go on to share a letter that I received as part of a grant, so I thought it would just be easier to read the letter. It explains it much better. And this is from Northern Light Acadia Healthcare. So I'll start midway through. I am pleased to announce that Northern Light Acadia Healthcare was awarded the grant that is called Maine Youth Mental Health Awareness Training Grant for a period of 5 years. With this grant, Northern Light Acadia Healthcare will increase the capacity of Acadia personnel to provide both youth and adult mental health first aid to the community, train adults who care for and work with youth on mental health first aid to identify youth mental health needs, facilitate referrals to care, and respond or de-escalate crisis situations, increase adult caregivers' awareness of their own mental health needs and how to respond to the mental health needs of adults with whom they work, and increase referral pathways for community-based partners to respond to mental health crisis and connect community members to mental health resources and services. And what does this mean for our district? Well, it means that we are part of the grant. It will service Androscoggin and Penobscot counties. I was able to participate in the kickoff earlier this week, and we are one of many partners, but there are very few school districts. So I'm very excited. The Bangor area does have many schools in this project, but I'm very excited about what this will bring. It will bring opportunities for both our students and our staff and our community in MSAD 52 to address some mental health needs and supports. And finally, this evening, I would like to acknowledge our staff. On March 13th, 2020, our lives changed. What we thought would be a 2-week time away from school turned into the remainder of the 2019-2020 school year. Then the summer of 2020 was filled with planning. That school year began with hybrid learning, remote days, quarantining, and close contacts. Many of us celebrated the end of the last school year believing that this school year would be better and that it would be different. And I think we'd all agree it is different. For the first time since I've worked in the district, and that is quite a few years, over 30 years, we were not together in this auditorium to celebrate the start of a new school year. Yes, our schools welcome back our students 5 days a week. Yes, our students can play outside or walk outside without masks. And yes, staff are gradually starting to have less Zoom meetings and more in-person meetings. These are all wonderful things to be celebrated. I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge that there are continuing challenges this year for our staff and for our students. Coming back together after over a year and a half away from each other and from normal school has shown us that we are different, individually and collectively. This global pandemic has impacted us all in some way. And from the bottom of my heart, I want to express my gratitude for the staff of MSAD 52. On behalf of Superintendent Brandt and myself, I wish you all a holiday season that brings you moments of joy, whether large or small. I hope you take time to remember how far we've come together.
Thank you. And I think it's important to note as well that certainly as board members, we've all received communications, be it casual communications at the corner store or less casual communications in the form of emails, that certainly there are folks around our community, in our schools, outside of our schools, that continue to be under tremendous stress. There are things that weren't even things 2 years ago that folks are experiencing on a regular basis, and certainly as we move into the holiday season, hopefully we can all find at least a few moments of grace and at least a little bit of a break. And certainly do intend that conversations continue, whether it's here in these board meetings, or I know our administrators are working diligently to try to think of different ways that we can reduce the stress that folks are under. I don't think any of us have either a magic wand or a crystal ball that's worth the warranty that's on it at this point as far as an easy solution, but I do hope that we all continue to work together to work on getting through all of this as a community. So thanks to everybody for continuing to work together on this. That brings us to public comment, and as has been practice at previous board meetings this fall into winter, I will refresh everybody's memory on our public participation policy, and that is BEDH, just in case anybody was wondering what its official name was. MSAD 52 Board of Directors meetings are conducted for the purpose of carrying on the official business of the school system. All regular, special, and emergency meetings of the board are open to the public. The public is cordially invited to attend and to participate in board meetings as provided in this policy. This policy applies only to meetings of the full board, not to meetings of board subcommittees. Although board meetings are not public forums, the board will provide appropriate opportunities for members of the public to express opinions and concerns related to the matters concerning education and MSAD 52 schools. The intent is to allow a fair and adequate opportunity for the public to be heard while ensuring that the time allowed for public discussion does not interfere with the fulfillment of the scheduled agenda. The board will designate a portion of its agenda as an opportunity for public participation. During the time allotted for public participation, members of the public may speak on any subject directly related to the operations of the schools, except for personal matters or personnel matters or complaints concerning specific employees or students, which shall be addressed through established policies and procedures. Members of the public may address the board within the guidelines provided in this policy. The chair, that would be me, shall be responsible for maintaining proper order and compliance with these guidelines. The following guidelines shall apply to public participation at board meetings. Citizens and employees of the school unit are welcome to participate as provided in this policy. Others may be recognized to speak at the chair's discretion. Individual employees and/or employee groups will not be permitted to discuss matters for which complaint or grievance procedures are provided. The chair may limit the time allotted for comments on a particular topic, which we've settled on 5 minutes, as well as the time. That was confusing, wasn't it? We haven't changed gears. 5 minutes for each individual, though the policy does state that we may limit the time allotted for comments on a particular topic. In the event of a sizable audience, the chair may require persons interested in speaking to sign up so they may be called upon in a fair and efficient manner. During the time set aside for public participation, the chair will be responsible for recognizing all speakers who must identify themselves as they begin talking. Speakers are not permitted to share gossip, make defamatory comments, or use abusive or vulgar language. All speakers are to address the chair and direct questions or comments to particular board members of the superintendent only with approval of the chair. Requests for information or concerns that require further research may be referred to the superintendent to be addressed at a later time. Members of the board and the superintendent may ask questions of any person who addresses the board but are expected to refrain from arguing or debating issues. Questions must be addressed through the chair. No complaints or allegations will be allowed at board meetings concerning any person employed by the school system or against particular students. Personal matters or complaints concerning student or staff issues will not be considered in a public meeting, but will be referred through established policies and procedures. In order to make efficient use of meeting time, the board discourages duplication or repetition of comments to the board. The board requests that groups or organizations be represented by designated spokespersons. The chair has the authority to stop any presentation that violates these guidelines or the privacy rights of others. Persons who disrupt the meeting may be asked to leave, and the chair may request law enforcement assistance as necessary to restore order. So that is, the process is as it has been. If we have folks who are interested in public comment, we do have the podium and microphone all set up over there, and we'll be happy to hear you.
I don't believe there's a paper there to sign up, so if people could just introduce themselves, then we can get their names. So their name and the town. Sorry,
So just as a reminder, there's not a sign-up sheet per se at the podium, so folks just remember to introduce yourselves and indicate what town you're from. We'll make sure to keep record of that.
Hello, Jimmy Childs from Leeds. First and foremost, I'd like to send my condolences to Miss Brandt and her family over their loss, and I hope things get better for them. So I guess my question I'd like to ask through the chair, has anybody looked at the numbers that's going on with Florida? They're the best in the nation right now. They have the lowest numbers. They're doing real good with a bunch of different type of mandates or non-mandates, and we're going through. So if nobody's looked at that, it might be good to look at, something maybe we could work on. And you know, there's a book, Bobby Kennedy wrote a book, The Real Anthony Fauci. It's a nonfiction. Tells about a lot of his corruption and crimes against humanity that he's been associated with. I know he's still on TV, so he's a big figure but his time is running short, and when that does come to suffice, I'm just wondering if anybody is going to feel differently about the choices that they've made, listening to the people that followed him, versus us being here for months trying to give you a bunch of different facts. You know, I don't come up here with opinions. I've stated a lot of facts. My very first time here, I quoted a John Ioannidis, and he's been in the independent news lately about a lot of things that has been going on. I mean, FOIA requests have uncovered a lot of things with Dr. Fauci, you know, so I just hate to see the good people of this town get persuaded by somebody that really isn't a good human being. Or at least keep that going. It's all right, we can all make mistakes, but we gotta, you know. And I'd like to ask the board, to the chair, if we could revisit the mask policy. Mainly, I think, you know, you talk about a lot of stress and stuff we're under, and I think that would help that is to let our kids take their masks off at their desks. You know, I think that would help a lot of us out. They wouldn't be masked for so long. A lot of these kids are getting headaches. You know, they're tired during class, they're tired when they get home, they're grouchy. That might help that a little bit. I know that some of the administrators and people that are at their desks in their offices don't have their masks on, and I think that's great. I don't think you should have to wear your mask when you're by yourself, and I'm not for that. But the policy that everybody signs says that all kids and all staff wears their mask during school hours. So, and I don't agree with that policy, but maybe if the kids could take it off at their desks, and you know, and the administrators that don't wear theirs when they're by themselves, which I don't think they should have to, but the policy states they do, you know, maybe that would relieve that. You know, there's just, you know, there's no reason why they can't do that. That would be a big thing for all of us. I mean, that would be a big win. You know, we're not here to fight against anybody. We're a community, and I think it would be nice if we all work together on some things. I know that some people don't get back to emails or don't respond and stuff, and I don't know why that is, but I mean, it is what it is. So my biggest thing is I'd like to see the kids be able to take off their masks at the desk. If the teachers are teaching and the teachers want to take off their masks while they're way away from the kids, if they feel comfortable, that would be awesome. It would help with the verbal skills and the, you know, just all that. It would help, because there's a new study out where kids actually are losing the verbal skills. Kids born from during the pandemic and after are actually losing, they don't have as much cognitive skills as the ones from before. I mean, that's a study out. I can't exactly cite the study, didn't find it, but I did see it on the independent news stations that I watch, which is definitely not the ones going down for sexual predatism like CNN. So anyways, and I just wondered, has anybody followed up on some of these kids that have been quarantined on how bad was their sickness, or was they maybe not sick? I know we had 50-something kids quarantined. Maybe 10 or 12 of them actually had the sickness or didn't. You know, that would be nice to know. And I know, I guess, you know, this disease is pretty bad. Actually, it ran through my family about a month ago. My father had it so bad that he actually thought he was dying. We brought him to the hospital. The only thing the hospital wanted to do was keep him in there on his back for a couple days. They didn't want to give him any antibiotics. When these people are laid on their back and not allowed to move, the stuff goes deeper down into their lungs, which makes them sicker, you know? So we pulled him out of the hospital, and we actually treated him ourselves with ivermectin and steroids and stuff, and he is 100% good to this day. I got it again for the second time. We all got it, actually, my brother, and
We're at 5 minutes
5 minutes?
now.
All right, thank you guys, have a Merry Christmas.
Thank you.
Are we not signing in? Sorry, did I miss that?
Yep, there's no sheet, so as long as you introduce yourself and remind us which town you're from, we'll make sure to keep track of that.
Super. So Catherine Libby from Green, 3 kiddos in the district. So I had just a couple of things that I wanted to talk about. One is I would like to just address that it is starting to feel a little bit like discrimination for the unvaccinated. When a vaccinated person is allowed to remain in school even though they could have it, they could transmit it, they're not held to the same standards. That is starting to really be frustrating, especially for the kids that are already having a difficult time with the mask. And just I feel like the treatment around the mask, my son has had to be picked up more than once at the high school for just not being able to concentrate and getting headaches. And of course, you know, we talk about it, who knows, it could be teenagers. He's the first of my teenagers, so time will tell. But when he is telling me these things, he is, you know, 15, turning 16 soon, he can kind of understand his own body, his own mental state. He knows what school was like before mass, and now he's having to deal with that. So while waiting for me in the office, and I was all the way in West Paris, it was one of the snow days, and I'm like, okay, well, I'll be there as soon as I can, call the school, let them know the situation of how far away I am. At one point, he asked for a mask break sitting in the office, and someone told him, you barely keep it on, period. Surely you don't need to go outside, you can wait until your ride gets here. Understandably so, Ms. Grant hasn't gotten back to me, so I haven't gotten it addressed, but that type of, I was in the school system, I taught for 3 years, and I can't imagine speaking to any child like that, but especially something like a mask. Like, and I'm sure, like Jimmy was saying, not everyone keeps their mask on, especially as an adult, all day long. And I think the kids are getting confused as to when he says that some teachers have them at the beginning of class and it's however it works, and then other teachers just say, just use your 5 minutes how you need to. And for a 15-year-old who's trying to coordinate, that's a lot. It's just one more thing on their plate when I don't believe it should be. So the definition of discrimination is the unjust or prejudicial treatment of different categories of people or things. Categories of people being vaccinated and unvaccinated. So again, I would at least like to say that if we have to keep following all of these different rules and stipulations that the CDC and the DOE are putting out there, then I'm now asking and calling for the board to say that every vaccinated person now needs to follow the same protocols if they are a close contact, because they can get it and they can give it. And if anything, I feel like it's a little bit even more so sometimes. I recently went to a hockey game. The vaccinated people just had to show a card. I'm good. I had to get a test within 48 hours. How is that not discrimination? So I could have gotten COVID from any of the vaccinated people there that didn't have to do anything to prove that they didn't have it in the first place. Breakthrough cases are up to almost 17,000. There's been over 200 breakthrough deaths, which is 30% of the deaths since vaccines rolled out. So as we can see, they're not exempt, can still get it, and they can still pass it on. So I feel like if we could just maybe try and address that, because now it's really starting to seem like discrimination towards the unvaccinated. Just to be mindful for anyone who's not keeping track, this, mind you, of course, was as of December 4th. I totaled up the hours. Your children, if you have any children in the district, have now been in a mask for 422 hours this school year, and that was as of December 4th. Think about that. That's a long time that we're asking them. As I sat down with the Dean of Students at Leavitt, I told her within the first 3 minutes of me sitting there, I don't feel comfortable. I'm making zero connections. I'm making zero connections with any of you right now because I can't see half of your faces. I can't tell your inflections to how I'm speaking. There's nothing here. This is what our children are dealing with on a day-to-day basis. I put my mask on and he immediately pulls it down. Continuously. That's not taught behavior. That is a child reacting to the fact that that's not normal for him. It's not normal for our children to be in school and having to make these connections. The younger kids have never gone to school normal. They've never seen a normal setting. That breaks my heart because we don't know what damage this is causing. And then to the kids that are like at my grade levels, between Leavitt and Tripp, they just want to go back to normal. They just want this to be over. Obviously, I understand we all do, no one wants to wear a mask, but I think again we need to start getting to the points of how are we going to start pulling forward out of this? If it's going to be 95% vaccination rate that the CDC is going to possibly require, that's going to take a lot of force. You don't even have that at your teacher level. You're not going to get it at a student level. You're going to see a lot more people homeschooling.
We're at 5 minutes now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You dropped your mama.
Matt Landry, I'm from Green. I did take my child out of school. I am homeschooling now. She was just saying that she's only been in school for a couple of years, and it's almost like, you know, she's not even going to really know what it's like to have a normal school. It seems like this, supposedly 2 weeks or whatever, the curve, you know, flatten the curve, it all started, you know, and it's just been going on and on. I mean, enough is enough. When is enough? We flatten the curve, you know, you're really going to want to expect vaccinations out of everyone when they seriously don't do what they say they do. I mean, the proof is there that they don't do what they say they do. So even at 95% vaccination rate, you're not going to fix anything. You know, this is starting to seem more like a medical school than actual educating kids, normal school environment. There is, seems to be discrimination going on in my eyes, and I don't know, when's enough enough? It's going to be time here. I did want to read a little note out of the Articles of Confederation. Article 4, basic rights of the people, the free inhabitants of each state, except for poor people who depend on charity, tramps, and fugitives from law, will have the same privileges and rights of citizens in every other state in order to maintain good relations between the people of different states. People of each state will be allowed to enter and exit every other state freely, will have the same rules of trade, business, taxes, and restrictions, can move their private property between states. Basically, you know, we have Florida, as Jimmy was saying, and I think recently Pennsylvania, that have been ruling this out. So basically, you know, we're starting to violate Article 4 here of that, amongst many other violations that I see here. So, you know, at some point you gotta decide here, when's enough, and, you know, we're gonna really have to start visiting these violations and return our kids back to normal, you know. You just can't keep doing this forever. It's you know, a handful of people. What authority do you claim you really have to pull this off? Who has given you this authority? As a board, I guess, you know, you've taken your vows and all that for the people, and then basically trample their rights. So this has got to stop. I'm not the best speaker in the world. I don't want to have to come up here, but this is just, it's time, you know, it's time to stop this nonsense. Yes, there is a virus going around. We all got to live with a virus. It's every year. There's a virus every year since I've been alive. I mean, I don't understand what are we going to have to do to appease. I mean, you can't appease everyone, obviously. You're always going to have two different sides to everything, but this is a school for the public, not necessarily a religious-based school, which you're almost claiming it's a religion for what you're pushing here. I mean, a lot of people don't believe that this stuff works, and it doesn't. It's showing that it doesn't work. So basically, I just ask you all to please reconsider, and before, you know, things have to get further into play here. Thank you.
Thank you. We have
Wes Soroy from Green. I'll preface this by I'm not conspiracy theorist, anti-vaxxer, anti-mask. I'm all good with that stuff, but I do have some questions regarding athletics and the policies that you guys have come up with for masks and so forth. One of them is, just wanted to know the rationale behind requiring athletes to wear them on on the floor during competition. And then also, in the same respect, on the road, when we're at another institution that doesn't require masks. And then my third question was more around moving towards the future if we have, hopefully we won't have any more remote schooling, is if we're still going to, the policy is still going to be to not allow athletics. And just quick reasoning behind that. For example, our boys team, if not all, nearly all are vaccinated. All the coaches are vaccinated. So it's pretty hard for them to understand why they have to wear a mask on the floor when the risk is so minimal, especially when they're out with their friends, same people not wearing masks, etc. As an official, basketball official and a coach, I'm in college gyms all the time where the fans wear masks, the players on the benches wear masks. As an official that's vaccinated, and the athletes do not have to wear masks. So I guess that's a question for you, Betsy. I guess that's how this works, the chair.
Yeah, and how we've dealt with questions that come up are certainly to follow up on them. I mean, if there are folks in attendance, if Mr. Shaw or Mr. LaRoche had easy answers to those, I mean, there's no easy answers for anything these days. And if either of those gentlemen would like to report back to the board on how that's playing out, I mean, obviously these are, like I said, there's no easy answers, but we could certainly, Mr. LaRoche touched on some of those things when he reported out to the board on what the plan was going forward on winter sports, and I do believe that that's...
I was under the impression that that was a decision by the board, not necessarily.
From the standpoint of Mr. LaRoche came forward with recommendations and kind of an agreed upon framework that, based on conversations with other schools in our area as well, he did report out to the board on what that was looking like.
Okay. Then I guess I would ask, as in all reality, they don't stay out during competition. As an official, our directive from the MPA has been to, unless the school administration asks us to enforce it, we are not going to enforce it. So take our game that we had at Madomic. Everyone had to wear masks because we have to wear masks on the road, so they wore masks. And the officials don't enforce it because they don't have to, because that athletic director didn't ask for it to be enforced, because normally they don't wear masks. I think, speaking for the kids, and I agree with them, that they've got vaccinated. The risk is extremely low that they're going to contract anything or transmit anything during athletic activity. That's pretty well shown. And I agree that they really shouldn't have to be wearing masks on the floor. I have no issue with on the bench. I have no issue with coaches. I have no issue, contrary to the previous comments, that if you're unvaccinated, then you should wear a mask. But I think that it just needs to get revisited as the season goes on. And in that same light, I would hope that, again, looking at the science and the risk factors, that if we do end up in a remote situation, that we don't cancel these athletes' season. Because 12 to 15 athletes in a gym that are all vaccinated, with coaches that are all vaccinated, even if they have to wear masks in that situation, is an extremely low remote risk of increasing the transfer rate of COVID. So as we move forward, and if that happens again, I would hope that the board would rethink having to cancel those sports events. I guess that's it.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to address the board this evening? If not, yes.
I just wanted to touch bases because I had a letter emailed to me about something similar that Teresa touched on earlier, just staff members' concerns with feeling
Absolutely, definitely want to reiterate that that is certainly on everybody's radar screen, and we will continue to work on what are good strategies around that moving forward. That brings us to old business, which we don't have any of. So we'll move on to the consent agenda. I would entertain a motion for the list.
Second.
And that was Carlos and Richard. All those in favor? Unanimous. That brings us to item 9.1. And item 9.1 is approval of a $300 cash donation to Green Central School.
Second.
Carlos, and a second from Richard. Discussion on this one. Discussion, I'm seeing head nodding. Thank you is the discussion on this one for sure. All those in favor? It appears to be unanimous. Item 9.2, approval of October operating and expenditure reports.
Second.
Carlos and Richard again. Discussion on this one. No discussion on this. All those in favor? Unanimous as well. Item 9.3, approval of revised job description for gifted and talented teacher staff.
So moved. Second.
Carlos and Richard. Discussion on this one. Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous, thank you. 9.4, approval of revised, it's a fascinating way that that's printed out, revised job description for office support assistant, transportation, and facilities.
Second.
Carlos with a second from Richard. Discussion on this one. Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous. 9.5, first reading and acceptance of revised policy GBN. And that is family medical leave and new regulations GBN-R1 and GBN-R2 and deletion of exhibition GBN-E.
Second.
Carlos and Richard. Discussion on this one? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous. That brings us to, if I remember, adjustments. Oh no, we're not adjusting yet. How could I forget this one? It's in red. Nomination of, drum roll please, Adult Education Director. And Teresa's going to
Hold on, I'm gonna my apologies.
multitasking. It's
I
fantastic.
pulled that out, so it would be right, ready? You know what I didn't do? I got it, thanks. All right, sorry about the delay. Yes, the interview committee is very happy to nominate Dr. Brian Brito as Adult Education Director in MSAD 52. Brian has served in the district as the lead teacher in adult education for the past 9 years, teaching high school diploma classes, and he serves as a college transition coordinator, helping to prepare students for college work. Brian has established relationships in adult ed, and his background and professional experiences will support him in this leadership role. Brian's collaborative and thoughtful leadership style will be an asset to the team. So the team is very happy to nominate Dr. Brito for this position. And Brian is here this evening, if anyone wants to.
Do we have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Carlos, Richard, discussion. Drum roll, please. All those in favor? Unanimous. Congratulations, and thank you so much for the work that you already are doing in the district, and this is an exciting transition, so we'll look forward to continued great things. Thank you. Yes, and I, something about big shoes over here? Yes, exactly, but we'll look forward to it very much. So we are, as discussed, adjusting slightly. We're saving 9.7 through 9.10 for after these next ones. We'll move on to 9.11. 9.11 is a discussion of dual eligibility for high school athletes, and I believe that Mr. Shaw and Mr. LaRoche have some information that they had put together on that, so I will turn it over to you, gentlemen.
Good evening. This past summer, I received an email from a parent asking about the ability to have student athletes compete in more than one sport in a season. The parent knew that there were several reasons for not allowing this at Leavitt, but he also pointed out that he knew at one time it was allowed by the athletic department. He wanted us to investigate the option of having an athlete do 2 sports in the same season, as long as it could be worked out between the coaches and be done safely. He understood to be sacrificed by the student athlete, and he knew that there would be very clear guidelines for this, including a plan for the 2 head coaches and the athletic administrator to help follow with the athlete. He also knew that other factors like grades and contracts would have to be considered as well. At that time, I told him this was not allowed in the district, and that there were several reasons to not allow it to happen, and that I agreed with those reasons. Later in the summer, the parent contacted Mrs. Brandt and asked that the subject of dual sport athletes could be brought to the school board, with a focus on it happening before the spring of 2022 season. He was very specific to his own children and their desires to participate in track and field while also playing baseball and softball at the high school level. In his email, he mentioned that he had spoken to the baseball and track coaches and that they both supported the idea. He made it very clear that he was also willing to do whatever it would take to create this opportunity for his children and any other students who would follow in their future. At this point, Mrs. Brandt requested a meeting between myself and Mr. Shaw. We met via Zoom to go over the next step. Mr. Shaw would contact the MPA to research the history of dual sports, the expectations on it, and how it came to be. I was tasked with contracting the local athletic administrators to find out what their policies were, how their policies worked, and how frequently it was used. And finally, I was tasked with meeting with our entire coaching staff to get their input and see what their thoughts were. We then met with the parent in August to let them know that we were researching dual sport participation and that it would take some time and we would get back to them. I put out a brief survey to all of the athletic directors in the Kennebec Valley Athletic Conference, asking them if they had dual sport participation, and if they did, what their expectations were, how often it was used, and how well it went. 14 schools responded to my survey. 6 out of the 14 responded that they do allow dual athletes. 4 out of the 6 that allow it rarely see anyone taking advantage of this. 2 out of the 6 that do allow dual sport participation have had a student quit one of the 2 sports midway through the seasons, and 2 out of the 6 said that they've never had any issues at all with their policies. Towards the end of the fall sports season, I held a meeting with all of the head coaches of all of the sports for all 3 seasons. In the meeting, we talked about the pros and cons of dual sport participation. The biggest issue came about when we talked about having games, meets, and matches on the same dates. Not a single coach wanted their team to be the secondary team. In other words, they didn't want to be the sport where the kid wasn't going to be there if both events happened on the same day. The traditional team sport coaches were not ready to have their starting shortstop, quarterback, striker, etc. missing a game that could have heel or Crabtree point implications, which is every game these days. The traditional individual sport coaches made it clear that the goal in their sports is to qualify as many athletes as possible for the conference and state championship levels with their best possible times, heights, and distances. And they only had 4 to 6 competitions to qualify, and missing any of these meets would hurt their chances to qualify with their best marks. There was also talk about creating the best relay teams available and wanting to have athletes at every practice. None of the coaches wanted athletes missing practices where they were implementing any new plays or different ways of running parts of their sport. There were some other issues brought up, including overuse injuries, overtraining the athletes, asking students to choose one sport over the other when there would be obvious scheduling issues, putting other athletes in the position of backing someone up who may or may not be there when it was time to practice or for an actual competition. Fear of pitting coaches against one another, especially when it was time to choose which sport would be the primary sport. And finally, what would happen at the end of a season when one sport is not doing well and the student athlete suddenly wants to focus on the team that is having a good season? At the end of the meeting, we did a straw poll, and it was unanimous that no coach wanted to have dual sport participation, and the main reason was wanting their athletes to be committed to their programs and not to be doing more than one sport at the same time. No one wanted their team to be the secondary sport. There were 15 coaches in attendance. There were 2 who let me know beforehand how they felt. 13 out of the 15 in the meeting voted to not allow dual sport participation. 2 abstained, and the 2 who were not there both made it very clear to me they were firmly against dual sport participation. Once we had all of this information collected, we let Mrs. Brandt know where we were and that we were ready, and it was time to put it on the agenda, and here it is this evening, and it's on the agenda. I'll hand things over to Mr. Shaw.
Thank you.
So first off, I just want to clarify what we're talking about here. And what we're talking about this evening are athletes who participate on two teams in the same season. And that wasn't necessarily clear in the title of the agenda item, so I wanted to make sure that we had that clarification. And I'm going to try not to repeat anything that Ryan said, but I will likely reference some of the things that he did. So as Ryan pointed out, we've been working on this for a while, and although it's not the first time that this particular request has come to us, as we do with any request, new or otherwise, we consider it based on the information that we have at the time. And in this particular case, it was time to gather new information because we hadn't had this particular request for a while. So as Ryan said, he reached out to other schools. I reached out to the MPA, and we had a meeting with the head coaches here in the auditorium a couple months ago. And all of those things provided some insight to us. So the first thing that we did, or often do, is to ask other schools what they're doing and how do you handle this particular situation. And as Ryan pointed out, some schools do it and some schools don't. It's fairly evenly mixed. But of the schools that allow it, it really appears to be an option that's not exercised very often. And I think that's fairly telling. And things that work happen all over the place. If they work in one school, they work in another school, and you tend to see things repeated in other places. If this was a practice that was great for all students in athletic programs, and it worked really well, everybody would do it. And that's clearly not what we're seeing happening right now. As Mr. LaRoche pointed out, we met with the coaching staff, and the discussion was a good one, and I'm going to say that a couple of times here. None of them came into this meeting with, headstrong against, they were open to having this conversation. It was a good conversation amongst the staff. There were a lot of concerns that were raised, but I also want to point out that one of the coaches shared a positive experience that he had with a model in a different school district. Ultimately, he wasn't for the idea, but he had a positive experience with it. So we also discussed the possibility of doing something like this on a case-by-case basis, but ultimately it was decided against because of the impossible position it would put coaches and the athletic director in when they had to make such a determination as those requests come in. So the group was overwhelmingly against moving forward with any plan allowing dual sport participation. Ultimately, in the end, the pros, which were any pros that we discussed, tended to be quite specific to an individual. Whereas the cons that we discussed tended to be towards entire teams and programs. So the cons overwhelmed the pros, and there was an overwhelmingly, they were against the idea. So as I said, I reached out to the MPA, and the Marine Principals Association does not have a rule against dual sport participation. So I reached out to ask why that might be the case, and I talked to the interscholastic director. I emailed back and forth with him. As it turns out, the intent of not having a rule against it is to leave the option open for small schools and districts who have difficulty filling their rosters and sometimes need students to be on 2 rosters so that both teams can have a season. So I questioned him further, and I said, am I on the right track then in assuming it would go against the spirit of not having a rule if a school had dual sport athletes but in fact had enough students to round out their rosters? And he indicated to me that yes, I was on the right track. And we fall into that category. We are not in a position where we need students to participate on 2 teams in order to complete rosters. Now, it has been rumored that this has happened here at Leavitt in the past, and it may have. It's been suggested that perhaps we had a soccer player kicking for the football team, but as of right now, I haven't found any corroborating information to suggest that that's been the case. What I do know to be true is it didn't happen when I was in school in the early 90s, and it hasn't happened in the last 15 years, so I'm not sure when it did. And I can't, so at this point I'm chalking it up to urban legend. If I find other information, I would definitely share that, but that's what I have right now. Either way, if the rumor even was true, the rumor does tend to indicate that it didn't go as well as planned. And so that's all I know about it having happened here in the past. Although this seems like a fairly simple and straightforward request, it's not. It's a small part of a much more complex athletic program, and additionally, this really isn't something we can experiment with to see how it goes. This is precedent setting, and that carries weight with it. However, in at least one regard, the experiment's already happening. And one of the concerns that was raised by the coaches, and Ryan alluded to it, was the potential for them to be pitted against each other if they didn't agree that they can make a dual sport participation work. And that's happening. It's happening now. It's happened this week. So it's a concern. In the interest of time, I'm not going to go back and forth on the pros and cons unless the board wishes me to do that. Ultimately, this boils down to choices, and making choices is a part of life and something students have to do all the time. It might be choosing which classes to take because there's only 8 periods in a day. It might be the college or career that they want to choose, or it could be the case of which team they want to participate on. As an organization, making decisions based on the interests of a single student or small group of students oftentimes does not have the positive implications for the greater student body or school program. As we know, there's not any one decision that happens in isolation, so the response of, sure, let's do this, fails to take that consideration to a complex system. At this time, I'm recommending that we continue our long-standing practice of not allowing students to participate on 2 teams during the same season, and the solution at this point would be for Mr. LaRoche and myself to continue working with Mrs. Brandt to consider athletic-related requests as they come in the context of the overall athletic program and how any changes to the program will impact the program specifically in the overall school and district in general. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think just a little bit more insight perhaps for board members as to why we're discussing this as an agenda item. I think we have processes with all of everything that goes on in our schools as far as conversations that happen on a building level. If it's we always want to resolve things at that level that's closest to the student, whether it's in the classroom or then the administrator, and then on up through the food chain. As both Mr. LaRoche and Mr. Shaw indicated, these conversations have been kind of ongoing for a period of time at this point, and I think it's not inaccurate to suggest that Mr. Sorois is not on board with where it has landed at this point. So that's why we're here with an agenda item, and certainly appreciate you 2 gentlemen bringing the research that you have done on this. I think it would be appropriate for Mr. Sorois to have an opportunity to share his thoughts that brought us here this evening, and I would remind folks that we do have a recommendation from Mr. Shaw on where we're at this point. And Mr. Sorois, if you would like to.
Thank you. First of all, I definitely want to thank Brian and Kim and Evan for entertaining it and putting in all the effort they have. Obviously, I disagree with their assessment. And I obviously have personal reasons. I have 3 children, 2 freshman girls and a senior that want to play baseball or softball and run track. Both would excel in each. To reiterate what they said, this is not something that's going to happen very often. And I would disagree that because it doesn't happen often means there's issues. I think that it means that there's not many kids that are committed enough and driven enough to put in the time, effort, and everything that it takes to do those things. I have, all these concerns, the concerns and assumptions I've heard, that, they're valid. But because we haven't tried it, I think they're just assumptions. I also appreciate that all the coaches gave input and voted in a straw poll. However, this really comes down to a couple sports. You're not going to have a field hockey player that wants to play 2 sports. You're not going to have a hockey player that wants to play 2 sports. This really comes down to track and field, indoor and spring, and whatever other team sport that athlete participates in, as well as the soccer player, boy or girl, that wants to kick field goals or something for the football team. Which brings me to another issue in discussion with the MPA. That happens all the time. That happens every season. There are a large number of schools that their soccer players are kickers on their football team. We played Portland High School this spring, and their kicker was kicking 45 to 50-yard field goals and was their best soccer player. So this isn't something that isn't done. Yes, it is rare. However, it is something that has been done for a long time, and it's still done. Overuse issues. These kids have been playing multiple sports and seasons forever. AAU basketball, baseball. Every summer we have our high school athletes participating in 2 sports over the summer. Field hockey and basketball, football and basketball. And we don't seem to have much of an overuse concern there. I mean, yes, we monitor that activity and try to make sure that everything's good, but again, it's really not an issue. I completely understand the secondary team thing. My original proposal was that the athlete would choose what their primary sport was, and that agreement would be made between the 2 coaches, the athletic director, the athlete, and the parent. That would be put down on paper, so there should be no issue moving forward during the season with the choices that need to be made because the expectations are laid out. That's the way I've understood it's done at other schools, and that's why there doesn't usually seem to be an issue. Yes, could you have an athlete that thinks they want to do something and quits? Possibly. But those are items that should be addressed in that upfront discussion and whatever they agree to. I had a good conversation with Jeff Benson, who is probably one of the most respected athletic directors in the state over the last several years. And his first comment was, absolutely that should be allowed. He had it at Edward Little and Oxford Hills High School. He said, I never really had an issue with it. He did say it wasn't something that was used by the athletes very often, but when it was not an issue because those things were addressed up front with that initial meeting. He also said, which I hadn't thought about, he said this is really no different than a student wanting to take extra classes over their expected load. They're making a choice to do more and better themselves. So what I would like to propose, and I know that the argument is this might set a precedent, but I would like to propose that this gets tried for one season, because it hasn't been. I've had subsequent conversations with the track coach, who still isn't for it in the original proposal that we had, but would be okay with it if the board decided to move forward, and would certainly make it work with the caveat that the student gets to choose the primary sport. So my proposal would be that we try it this spring. Again, we're talking less than 10 kids that are going to take this up. And it's not just my kids. I've had several other kids that I coach that would love to play baseball and run track, or softball and run track. And these are kids that are going to qualify. These aren't kids that are going to just go show up just to do something. They're kids that are going to increase that number of kids that qualify and improve that track team's goal of to have kids qualify for meets. For example, my daughter, who had never practiced the 400, as an 8th grader last year, ran a 400 meter that would have placed second in the Lewiston and Leavitt high school meet. Now, she also got to play softball last year as part of rec, and that's her favorite sport, so she's going to choose softball. And to me, it's a shame that someone like that can't compete in an individual meet with the potential of scholarship in that. Going back to the football and soccer thing, we could have a kid that plays soccer, loves soccer, is never going to play soccer in college. However, can kick a 45-yard field goal and get a scholarship. Why would we ever prevent that right out without any discussion? So, in my mind, the pros, and it's not just someone's athletic ability and being able to compete in 2 sports, but it creates some life lessons. They have to be able to budget time, they have to be able to communicate, they have to be able to make sacrifice, they have to put in the time, effort, and energy to compete in compete in both those sports, plus keep up their grades and their contract that they've signed. So my request is that we don't outright not allow this to happen. I mean, it happens all over the state. All the parents, coaches, college coaches, athletic directors that I've spoken to outside of Leavitt, I have not heard one person say it's a bad idea. I've had a bad experience. It shouldn't be allowed. I've heard just the opposite. Why would we limit an athlete that wants to put in that effort? On top of the fact that these kids, as all of us, have been dealt a pretty rough hand over the last year and a half. We've got kids that have missed a whole year of not only their education, but their co-curricular activities. And if there ever is a time to try it, I would think this would be the time to try it, to give these kids that actually want to put in that time and effort to do that. You know, on a personal level, if it doesn't happen, my son's going to run track, and I'm going to be bummed that I'm not going to get to see him play baseball this senior year. And I don't blame him. He's never done it, and he wants to see what it's about. However, he's also one of the best baseball players on the team, and that's a tough pill to swallow. So that's my request. I would request that we try it. You've got 95% of the kids that are ever going to do anything, it's going to be baseball, softball, track. It's coming up in the spring. I've already told the track coach, If my son plays baseball again, I will be helping coach baseball. So I've already said that I will do whatever it needs to be done to give this a try. I think the track coach is willing to work with this if it's approved. He's not pushing for it. He doesn't necessarily, but he would definitely work with it. The baseball coach, I'm not sure anymore.
And I don't think it's fair to speculate on what our
Right.
what our different coaches are
Exactly.
thinking at this point. So to be clear, we've heard from Mr. Shaw and Ms. LaRoche that they are not looking to change our current practice. You've certainly made a fairly impassioned plea for a change, and so that would require some sort of action from the board, and I guess I would just look to board members, but at the same time, I would caution folks that generally speaking, the board does not, we employ very skilled administrators in all of our buildings, and we trust them to do the day-to-day things that make our schools run. So with that, I would look around the table and see if anyone's interested in making some sort of motion, and if not, we can move along with our evening. Yuri?
I would make a motion that we retain our current practice. I think that, while I appreciate the presentations, I think that taking into account the jobs that we have chosen our administrators to do, I think that it is their best decision that guides us forward significantly better than the opinion that I would be able to provide in that scenario.
Just from a process standpoint, we don't need a motion to continue with the practice that's going right now. If any other board members wanted to comment or anything like that, we could certainly. Carlos?
I would support a motion to allow them to be tried.
Do we have a second? Second from Jessica. Discussion? Crystal?
It was touched on, what happens, you said that your daughter is a great runner, but she would choose softball. So let's say she qualifies for states and softball goes to states and it all happens on the same weekend. What happens at that point when track coach is like, we could win something, softball is the same way, and she declared softball? I get what you're saying, because then it feels, that's terrible that she would miss out potentially on winning an individual event, letting down softball, vice versa.
So, in my mind, I mean, that's a good hypothetical. In my mind, if she's chosen softball as her primary sport, she's going to go softball. If she can get to that meet, she's going to get to the meet. But again, that's an individual event for her at that point in a state meet. At that point, the chances of scheduling is pretty unlikely, but it's possible. But my biggest thing is you're giving that choice to the athlete, the kid that's worked hard at both and knows that this is kind of a secondary thing, and that's what they're going to do. Like the other thing is, I know that one of the big issues is, and I completely agree with this as a coach, I don't want my starting point guard missing a game that affects his team to run in a track meet, and I don't believe that is going to happen. And I also have no issue with when you sit down and let's say that athlete chooses their primary sport.
I'm sensing that Mr. Shaw has something else he'd like to say. I think I'd like to let him.
I think this is something I just want to get out there, and that is this is a point that, and Wes and I have had this conversation, so this is nothing new that he's going to hear me say here. We are in a position to value one sport over another, and oftentimes what happens is, and I know Wes is talking about going to a track meet and running in an individual event. That is 100% true. But if the track coach has been relying on those points for the entire season and then doesn't have them at the state meet, that's a disservice to that track team. teams are teams. There may be sports that have individual aspects to them, but teams are teams, and there are team aspects to every single activity that we have, and placing a value over one over the other is a very unfortunate statement to make.
Thank you. So I'm not going to encourage a back and forth on this. I think you three gentlemen have had lots of opportunities to have these conversations. I think if board members have questions or have other discussion that needs to happen around this motion, that would be the point that we're at in our activities on this. Other discussion on this? Yeah, I would like to weigh in. I don't like the idea of this at all. I think that we've already spent 20 minutes more this evening talking about something that's nothing related to academics. I think that sports are a fabulous enhancement to the students' experience in our schools. I'm pretty sure that academics are why we exist. So that's a little bit of discomfort that we can't find things that we'd like to talk about for longer periods of time that have to do with academics. I also don't like the idea of not being consistent with what Mr. Shaw just described about teams. Teams are teams, and if there are some lessons that we're hoping that our student athletes learn around being part of a team, I'm not comfortable with that message that picking and choosing between two sports is a fun activity that's going to happen.
Yeah, I just asked a question. Or
You certainly may.
So, how is this any different than when I went to school and was an athlete, drama, Odyssey of the Mind, National Honor Society, all those things conflicted, and I had to make choices and skip things? That's no different. Secondly, this is a pet peeve of mine. Athletics are not extracurricular, they are co-curricular. And the NFHS is someone that promotes that greatly. The skills, life skills, and learning that my kids and the athletes I coach get equally as much of an education than they do memorizing things to take a test and meet a standard. And I think it's time that, as a society and a school board, that we look at that equally, because there are a lot of kids that are in school and stay in school because of athletics, because of drama, because of band, and that's one of the only reasons why they maintain their coming to school every day, to learn. And to say that academics is our priority, absolutely. However, there's an equal part of that that goes with the co-curricular things that we offer. And I think for too long that has been put down here instead of more equal where it should be.
Other discussion from board members? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion? 2 in favor, those opposed?
I'm abstaining.
1 abstain. You got those, Teresa?
Yes. Thank you.
That wasn't a trick question. Thank you, folks, for presenting that this evening, and thank you for bringing this to us as well. I'm certain that we'll have more conversations, as we do every year, around the importance of all the activities that our students are able to participate in. That brings us to item 9.12, approval of Green Central School fundraiser, Coins for Kentucky, to donate monies to Beechwood Elementary School in Fort Mitchell, Kentucky for Mayfield residents. Carlos, and Richard is very quick with Teresa.
Doug has a clarifying.
Guys, may I clarify?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, usually we like to get plenty of agenda items on this agenda in plenty of time, and unfortunately, because of the timeline of these tragic events, it was done very quickly. And it is accurate that Beechwood Elementary School is in fact doing fundraising. However, we have since found out that Mayfield is actually an independent school district, and they have their own elementary school. So although the Fort Mitchell, Kentucky will be doing their fundraising, we think it's more appropriate to send it directly to Mayfield ourselves. So we'll be reaching out to Mayfield Elementary School directly. So we just wanted to clarify that way it's not going through yet another school district. So Jennifer Simmons is going to be reaching out. I think it's either to Marion Vicky or Jessica O'Neill, the counselors at Mayfield Elementary, to figure out the kind of the best route. The good news is, just if there is a little glimmer of it, when we checked the Mayfield Elementary School website this evening, they've actually said, okay guys, no more generators, no more any, we've got enough, and FEMA is now here. So there's a plus there, but I just wanted to clarify that for the board. So thank you.
Thank you. Other discussion on this one? Richard?
This is the kind of activity that I think we need to encourage among all of our students at any and every grade level and age level. It teaches them the importance of being concerned about other people and their issues related, in this case, to a natural event. And I just feel very, very strongly that this is the kind of mindset and activity that we need to encourage amongst our students.
Other discussion? Yes, Kelly.
I just want to say that Mr. Parker invited the other elementary school to participate, and my student leadership team expressed interest and wanted to join, and so we discussed that at our student leadership activity, and I told them that we were going to the board tonight to ask, although some of them might have already started getting excited about it, may have some change already at school. May or may not, but so we are going to join if that's okay for the board.
Excellent. Thank you. Do we need to, Teresa, and I guess this is just a note, should the motion then reflect?
Yes. It should reflect both, it should reflect any of the schools participating in this fundraiser.
Okay. Just so everybody's clear, and certainly that we want to make sure that we're recognizing the good work that folks are doing as well. Any other discussion on this one? All those in favor? Unanimous? Thank you. That brings us to item 9.13. 9.13 is approval of rates of pay for professional staff substitutes due to minimum wage increase effective January 1, 2022.
Second.
Carlos and Richard. Discussion on this one. Just, I think, a note to self, Teresa, this is an ongoing conversation. I believe these, if I understood correctly in the packet, these changes would keep us in line with minimum wage changes. We're continuing to
look at ways to increase the substitute teacher pool, and there have been discussions about increasing the rate of pay. This increase at this time will bring us in line with a minimum wage change that happens on January 1st, 2022.
So board members should be anticipating continued conversations around this, perhaps.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous? That brings us, per our adjustments, back to 9.7, unless there are any other items of business that we need to take up while we still have some folks in attendance? If not, I would certainly entertain a motion for 9.7, and that is a request for an executive session to discuss the AFSCME Council 93, Local 2010, AFL-CIO, AFSCME in parentheses, negotiations pursuant to 1 MRSA 4056D. Carlos and Yuri. All those in favor? Unanimous. Richard raised his hand on the way. Thank you. So, and just so folks are aware, our other executive session is to discuss the Tri-Town Education Association support staff negotiations pursuant to 1 MRSA 4056D, and we have the attendant agenda items that would be any action as warranted, so we'll certainly record any action on those two as well. Thanks, folks, for being here, and as we discussed earlier this evening, it is the holiday season, and wishing everyone a little bit of grace and joy and maybe not a lot of snow.